I want people to understand this. I am not one of those who's likely to run for office, so that's out of the question. On the other hand, too, I do not hold any position within the NDC's party. I don't hold any elected position. I don't hold any position of leadership within the NDC party at any level. I used to be the chairman of the constituency branch in St. John. In fact, I have served as public relations officer, but mostly as the chairman of the constituency branch. At the time when NDC won elections in 2008, I was the chairman of the constituency branch at that time. Okay? I also served as the personal assistant for just over 1 year, a year and a couple months, under the then parliamentary representative for St. John, until I left at the end of November on my own free will. Okay? I left. And I say this to say that I am not speaking from a position of being a spokesperson for the National Democratic Congress. I am not. I am a Grenadian. I am a voter. I am a citizen. And that is the perspective from which I speak. And for me, it is a simple thing. When it comes to making the decision to vote, it comes down to a simple thing of a comparative analysis between the two entities that offer themselves. And when I look at Dr. Mitchell and the NNP, I see a leader and a party with a track record, and to me that is critical, with a track record, because both parties have been in government, with a track record of, as I said early on, being very good at electioneering and all those other things that I mentioned, but not being good on governance. They have done an atrocious job of governing the country. They have done an atrocious job of providing a strategic and constructive development agenda for this country. And having been a youth back then when the revolution happened, although I had my issues with that regime, one can appreciate that that regime operated and was guided by a development agenda, and we experienced the fruits of that endeavor, and we are still experiencing the fruits of that endeavor today. Because there were many things that were talked about and that were dreamed about prior to their coming that never happened. But within the 4.5 years that they were there, these things happened. So I can appreciate that. And after having lived through that period, that's one of the yardsticks, that's one of the main yardsticks that I use to determine who qualifies for them to operate and to manage the affairs of state as against who don't. And Dr. Mitchell has not, and the NNP have not done a good job for that. That is indisputable. That cannot be disputed.
Totally
I would
agree.
like to see somebody dispute these things, and I haven't found one as yet.
Yep.
What also cannot be disputed is that irrespective of whatever NDC's shortcomings have been, and whatever NDC shortcomings are presently, their track record is that when they're in office, the following either does not happen or happens. One, what doesn't happen is that you do not find them doing deals with international criminals, as has been the case with Dr. Mitchell and the NNP. That doesn't happen. Two, when these deals take place with Dr. Mitchell and the NNP, it either costs the country a it brings a pressure on the country, is either in cost or in kind. So it either costs the country hundreds of millions of dollars, or it costs the country its reputation and its international standing and respect. You do not see that under an NDC administration. It has never happened in the 2 times that they have been there. That's 2. 3, NDC, under an NDC administration, they make an effort to respect and to allow the institutions of government, the rules of the game to play out, right? If the institutions, the rules of the institutions, you can consider them to be the referee in a football game. So if they call foul on them, they don't dismiss it and say we have a right to do as we did. You can take them to task on it. You cannot do that with Dr. Mitchell. Remember the issue when he said there is a law. There is a law that says that if you accumulate holidays, you are supposed to take it. And if you don't take it, then you lose it. But I chose to do differently. And I chose to keep these people in the positions and to pay them for their holidays. Although he said from his own lips, there is a law. You don't find the NDC people in NDC government sitting in a press conference and telling blatant lies like we have refurbished a building in Snell Hall, well, we didn't call the place, in St. Patrick, and we have trained people to do furniture making, and they wouldn't have to be paid from the skills training program, so they would be able to do the education, and schools would be able to, will have to buy furniture from them when no training have taken place. The place has not been outfitted or anything. You don't find them doing that. It is different, and they take a constructive approach in trying to develop a governance agenda and a development agenda for the country. That is my yardstick that I use to measure who qualifies to manage the affairs of the country. And that's why when the question comes up, well, if you take him out there, who will go put? I always say anybody else will do a better job, because they have not done a good job of governance of this country. It's that they were a total waste of time. And I guarantee that an NDC administration will be an improvement, in spite of the shortcomings, in spite of the flaws. Because the flaws that are being pointed out regarding the National Democratic Congress is about electioneering. That's the flaws that are being pointed out, electioneering. And that's all that Dr. Mitchell is very good at. And he has played on the mindset and the psyche of the people because they keep focused on electioneering. Electioneering cannot provide you with the quality of education, with the quality of health care, with the quality of policies that are going to be enabling for the poultry industry and other people involved in development programs and projects. So I just wanted to say this and to get our people thinking that they have a responsibility. It's not the NDC.
Right.
Who is going to bail the cat? Dr. Mitchell says in the speech, and that is this year's independence speech, he says, sisters and brothers, even as we face this monstrous challenge, it is imperative that we take stock of where we are as a country, as a people, as a small player on an enormous global stage. There is no question about the significant strides we have made, but the reality is there is so much left to be done. Guided by the targets and milestones set out in our 15-year National Sustainable Development Plan. And that's the thing, they talk about this plan, but you don't know what the details of the plan are. And that is not being discussed with the people. He says, government envisions a future of hope, a future of targeted interventions, but collectively seek to further propel development. A future where dreams and aspirations become the reality of the foundation that is laid for the generations to come. The future of hope is particularly predicated on the possibilities that now abound with the recent repurchase of major shares in the island's lone electricity company, Grenec. He reminds me of someone who used to was responsible for the party's organization and structures and so on and so forth. But when you got into general council or into convention, where that individual is supposed to provide reports as to what is the status of the different constituency branches, what's the status of the polling division groups, how strong are they, how have they been doing in terms of the constitutional framework and the holding of elections, how effective are the executive membership, and so what training and whatever what development agenda do you have taken? There's no reports of that nature. And they would come and give these superficial speeches that sound very good on the surface, as Dr. Mitchell just said. The future of hope is particularly predicated on the possibilities that now abound with the recent repurchase of majority shares in the island's lone electricity company, Grenec. And it's left at that. It doesn't say in what way these benefits are going to accrue. Who are the people that's going to benefit from it? What are the specific steps that are going to be taken? These are the things that you need to hear from a prime minister in speaking to these things. And that's the difference, and that's one of the things that I admired about that period of the revolution. When Maurice Bishop spoke, he told you what are the specific things that are going to be taking place in terms of a development agenda. This year is going to be the year of whatever, and these are the steps that's going to be taken. These are the approaches that we are going to be taken, and the role that is expected of the people in accomplishing these things. You don't get that from this guy. He says, let us take a moment to appreciate that fact, and he's talking about milestones that we have reached, that we have accomplished over the 47 years. He said, it is said that gratitude determines altitude. Therefore, as we push forward with our development agenda, we must pause periodically along the way and reflect on our achievements, using them as motivation to continue the journey. These achievements include the St. George's University, which has played an enormous part in the development of our country over the years, the building of the international airport, advancements in education and social development, the bringing of potable water to the length and breadth of the country, and the provision of electricity services to so many villages in a short period of time. In other words, the quality of life of our people has consistently improved. I mean, while the electrification and water development would have taken place, a lot of that started during the revolution period, and they were continued in the aftermath because there was this trust to bring these services to some of these areas. But most of the major development and the major contributors to our, of note, St. George's University, he wasn't responsible for that.
No.
The international airport, he wasn't responsible for that. Advancement in education and social development, he cannot take any particular credit for that. The social programs, the public assistance, it was the NDC administration, the first NDC administration of 1990 to 95 that put that in place. Under the last NDC administration, it was them that signed with the World Bank for the SEED program, which is one of the things that government is using as a political tool in this time to coerce and to intimidate and victimize people. So there's not much that in terms of, look at education, for example. advancement in education, significant advancement in education under the PRG government. Okay, you had many people who would not otherwise have had the opportunity to have tertiary or university education, were able to have that. Now, to get a scholarship with them, it has to go to cabinet and so on, and they make these determinations based on your political affiliation or your perceived political affiliation, who your parents are or who they are not, and that kind of thing. Whereby under the NDC administration, they had a scholarship desk, and that was taken care of by the public servants who work in that area. It didn't have to go to cabinet for a decision on it. You saw that the NDC administration, they established a national training agency, which is now putting in place those training modules and certification for all of the young people who's involved in training for the same Imani program that government talks about, that they don't even have, how we call it, an exit strategy for. Okay? And it was the NDC who put the NTA into play in December of 2008, after coming into office in July of 2008. It was them who brought about a free school book program for students, and so, which this government has gotten rid of. So there isn't anything of significance that this administration can take credit for. In terms of the development over these 47 years. And Dr. Mitchell has been Prime Minister for the longest time during that period. And check what the things that he has spoken here for, he can't take credit for none of them. I mean, we look at the building of the Guelph Bridge and so on and so forth, the Harbour Bridge, and so, and refurbishment of some of the schools. That was the money that came from the World Bank that Nazimburg signed for in 2011.
Right. So that is.
And the money for Hillsview Home, we still don't know what become of it. The money for Hillsview Home that was part of that package, we still don't know what become of it up to today. There's another indication of the superficial statements. Those empty statements that have no further foundation and no depth to it whatsoever. Putting our people back to work is an important part of this process. Many private and public sector projects will come on stream this year. Government recognizes the construction sector as the one that will spearhead the recovery effort, and we anticipate these projects providing jobs for hundreds and even thousands of Grenadians and helping to stimulate the local economy. Nothing more to it.
That's my
but
point.
It speaks about those projects, and hear what it says about the hotel projects that you mentioned. 3 major hotel projects are underway in Mount Hackman, St. David, and St. Patrick, with a 4th anticipated to follow soon. And the developers have all expressed an interest in providing training to young Grenadians to prepare them for jobs when the hotels become operational. Plans like these align perfectly with the concerted efforts being made by government to empower our young people and to find opportunities to transition out of the various programs facilitated by government. Did you hear this?
Yeah.
Do you hear anything concrete there? Now, we had the building of a major hotel, and it was touted as something that was going to provide how many jobs and so. What's the extent of that? Have we done an analysis of that? And can we see how many jobs it actually provided for these people, for our people? And what's the extent of the benefits that is being accrued from that? Yeah?
Still waiting.
What are the levels? What are the levels of these jobs that people are being prepared for? It says that the pandemic has caused many things to be put on hold, but the education of the nation's children must continue. Government is therefore vigorously pursuing e-learning. Government is therefore vigorously pursuing e-learning. I want to read that over again.
Yeah.
Government is therefore vigorously pursuing e-learning. We have equipped all our secondary school students and teachers with devices to facilitate e-learning, and we are now moving to similarly equip students at the primary level. I mean, this is so dishonest because all secondary school students don't get tablets. That is not true, and in many instances, them devices not working. Children can't go online to get whatever. I mean, I've listened to parents who are children. I've listened to people calling on the radio and speaking about it. I've seen people writing on social media and speaking about it. Yes. So what this man saying, there's no reality and there's no truth to it, there's no fact to it. So the teachers are still challenged. Yes.
Right. So
why are you saying they don't have no substance?
So the proof is not in the pudding in that case?
No. In the aftermath of the 2013 elections, when Dr. Mitchell was giving his inaugural speech, he said, we shall be a government in the sunshine. That they are going to be open and exposed, and that the parliamentary representatives will be mandated to go to the constituencies and to be grilled by them and to report to them. And none of that has happened. Dr. Mitchell just says these things when the microphone is in front of him and he has an audience. He just says all the things that sounds good. And none of it becomes reality. He just says these things. Like, for example, this time now he's in speaking about the hardships that people are facing, the amount of jobs and so that's been lost because of the situation with the tourism sector as a consequence of COVID-19. He says that he has prided himself as being able to sleep comfortable, but the suffering of the people now keeps him up at night and so on. You know, it's such a burden in these unprecedented times and so on. And he says that we must remember these people, and we need to be able to, he says, unprecedented times necessitate strategic, innovative, outside-the-box thinking to find solutions that will soothe the desperate cries of those among us who simply have no means of helping themselves right now. We must remember them and do what we can to help them. And that's why he says, it is for this reason that I plan to present a proposal to the social partners. The social partners, there again, for the creation of a social fund that will be used to help the most vulnerable in our society. The concept is that everyone who is working will contribute towards this fund. I will lead by example, contributing a portion of my salary every month to help those in need, and I will be encouraging my cabinet colleagues to do the same. Similarly, I will be encouraging everyone who is able to make a contribution to do so. Right? He says it is not mandatory, but we are a Christian society, as we spoke about earlier on. After all, and we are called upon to be our brother's keeper. In 1 John 3, verses 17 to 18, it is stated, and I quote, if anyone has material possessions and sees his brother and sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words and speech, but with actions and in truth. Unquote. He says that in speaking about the setting up of that fund, he says the way I envision it, the social partners will establish an independent committee to manage and disburse the funds acquired through this effort. We know that no committee could be independent once government is the one, driving it. Any beneficiary of this initiative must be someone with a justifiable need that can be verified. And there are many who fit that category. We know again that that is not going to work based on what has been on the front page of one of the newspapers this week, where we find that there is a case with government because the seed program that is supposed to be for looking after these kinds of people, a lot of ghost payments were being made, and so much so, the acting PS in the Ministry of Social Development called it out, and they took her to task on it, and now the matter is before court. So it just tells you that these people, they're not genuine. These people are not genuine in no way, at all. So he goes on to say, he says that you know, he's talking about the different categories of people who fit that bill. He says farmers, fishermen, workers in hotels, restaurants and bars, tourism and market vendors, taxi drivers, water taxi operators, tour operators, tour guides, other industry providers, including operators of marine-based businesses, LIAT workers, and others involved in aviation services, hairdressers, barbers, entertainers, school-based vendors, shopkeepers, travel agents, small travel agencies, other business owners, property owners. The list goes on and on. So many of our people are hurting. Sisters and brothers, if you are overwhelmed by the few categories identified here, imagine how I feel on a daily basis, hearing the cries of so many people. The way I see it, I can either be so overwhelmed that I become powerless to help, or I can use the cries as motivation to find solutions. I opt for the latter. Making a difference in the life of one person may seem insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but to that person, it represents a much needed lifeline at a time when all else seems lost. We can all be that lifeline to a brother or a sister in need. The reality of the situation facing us now is that while some are forced to make something out of nothing, others are demanding more. Remember I spoke earlier about how he sets up these scenarios, this confrontational situation, these people demanding more and they are going to take away from you.
Yes.
And you're talking about unity? Sisters and brothers, the battle is long and clearly quite daunting, but I am confident that we will win. The key to victory in this battle is collaboration, a collective effort working together hand in hand towards a common objective. We unite and we persevere, confident that the challenges of today will give way to a brighter tomorrow. Our celebration of this national milestone today is a reminder that good things are still happening despite COVID-19. Okay? So, there you have it, about working together. Has this government really demonstrated an approach that can qualify as working together and hand in hand? When you sit, when all you do is try to con people? In the run-up to the elections, you went and you sat down with the public servants, with the teachers, and you came to certain agreements with them. And afterwards, when you got into office, you say, well, you didn't sign for this and you didn't sign for that, and that wasn't in the agreement. And up till now, that hasn't been resolved. Instead, when the people stood up and decided to protest for what was happening, you ended up redacting the pay and all that kind of thing. How does that call for working together? Working together hand in hand? You signed an agreement with them for 4% increase, and then you unilaterally took a decision that you were not going to pay the 4%, and you just informed them of that. You don't come back to the table and sit down with them to work out the parameters of that. They present you with an alternative proposal, and you refuse to negotiate it with them, and you're just adamant that you're not going to pay the 4%. And now you're saying that while some people are being challenged and whatever, some are asking for more. Yeah. The list goes on, and so many people are hurting, and so on. The reality of the situation facing us now is that while some are forced to make something out of nothing, others are demanding more. So, I mean, in essence, apart from the talk about the COVID-19 and thing, this was the real essence of our Prime Minister's address on that day.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, the rest of it was talking about COVID-19, and we don't need to go into that. We all know what COVID-19 is.
Yeah.
But at independence, this is when you expect more or less the leader to be laid out to you. Yeah, as he spoke about the accomplishments, what's the development agenda going forward, and how these things are going to work in real term. And all he could offer is a proposal for a social fund to be established. Sisters and brothers, The battle is long and clearly quite daunting, but I am confident that we will win. The key to victory in this battle is collaboration, a collective effort working together hand in hand towards a common objective. We unite and we persevere, confident that the challenges of today will give way to a brighter tomorrow. Our celebration of this national milestone today is a reminder that good things are still happening despite COVID-19. Okay? So, there you have it, about working together. Has this government really demonstrated an approach that can qualify as working together and hand in hand? When you sit, when all you do is try to con people in the run-up to the elections, you went and you sat down with the public servants, with the teachers, and you came to certain agreements with them. And afterwards, when you got into office, you say, well, you didn't sign for this and you didn't sign for that, and that wasn't in the agreement. And up till now, that hasn't been resolved. Instead, when the people stood up and decided to protest for what was happening, you ended up redacting the pay and all that kind of thing. How does that call for working together? Working together hand in hand? You signed an agreement with them for 4% increase, and then you unilaterally took a decision that you were not going to pay the 4%, and you just informed them of that. You don't come back to the table and sit down with them to work out the parameters of that. They present you with an alternative proposal, and you refuse to negotiate it with them, and you're just adamant that you're not going to pay the 4%. And now you're saying that while some people are being challenged and whatever, some are asking for more. Yeah, the list goes on, and so many people are hurting and so on. The reality of the situation facing us now is that while some are forced to make something out of nothing, others are demanding more. So, I mean, in essence, apart from the talk about the COVID-19 and thing, this was the real essence of our Prime Minister's address on that day.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, the rest of it was talking about COVID-19, and we don't need to go into that. We all know what COVID-19 is.
Yeah.
But at independence, this is when you expect more or less the leader to be laid out to you. Yeah, as he spoke about the accomplishments, what's the development agenda going forward, and how these things are going to work in real term. And all he could offer is a proposal for a social fund to be established.